Debbie Gould has also asked for the opportunity to make an announcement.
Hello, everyone. I am also, in addition to being on the Nashville League board, I'm also the state advocacy chair. And for those of you who have not seen the information in the news today, or Chancellor Ellen Hobbs-Lyle had a ruling yesterday that has temporarily lifted the eligibility requirement for absentee voting, so that concern about fear of the pandemic, it would be considered one of the categories under illness. And essentially anyone could claim that as a reason for eligible voting, which is wonderful, wonderful news. It's a really very thoughtful decision that she reached. If you read it, you will be impressed with her line of logic and finding it unconstitutional. We, of course, assume that there will be an appeals process from the state, but for right now, this stands. And I, along with a number of other league members, listened in on the Davidson County Election Commission meeting, which was coincidentally held by phone just a little while ago. And they are waiting for guidance from the state as to how to handle it, because of course they need to all follow uniform standards about how to move forward with absentee voting. So we will continue to update all our information through all our communication channels and continue to spread out this information to other parts of the public, including, of course, through the Y, Sharon. So we certainly will look to you as one of our communicators on that. And I also would really like to take just a moment of privilege to really urge everyone to look at one of the opinion pieces that Stacey Abrams wrote yesterday in the New York Times. And I'm just going to quote out of context just a little snippet, because I thought it was so powerful and spoke so much to the moment we're all having, where we're trying to help people feel empowered by voting when they might feel frustrated by the current events. And she said, she wrote in part,
on my screen.
voting is an act of faith. It is profound. In a democracy, it is the ultimate power. Through the vote, the poor can access financial means, the infirm can find health care support, and the burdened and heavy laden can receive a measure of relief from a social safety net that serves all. Every night for more than a week, we have witnessed the anguish and anger of demonstrators, their cries punctured by politicians urging them to vote their power. Both are right. Protests to demand attention to the wrenching pain of systemic injustice, and voting because we deserve leaders who see us, who hear us, and who are willing to act on our demands. And I thought it was a really powerful statement of why we care so much about voting and why we feel that it's important that everyone have access to it. And certainly this issue around absentee voting is one of the key elements that we're seeing right now. So thank you for giving me that moment, Ethel, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Debbie. I would ask if everyone, if you're not muted, to please mute your screen. There's a way to do that down on the very left-hand corner. It's my privilege today to introduce our speaker. Sharon Roberson serves as the president and CEO of the YWCA of Nashville and Middle Tennessee. Before she was in this position, she was the senior vice president, general counsel, and secretary for the Direct General Corporation. Sharon has over 30 years of experience in the insurance industry, including 17 years with AIG, American General Life and Accident, and American General Property. Sharon held the position of general counsel and assistant commissioner for the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance, as well as a director of self-insurance and surplus lines. And she was appointed by both a Democratic and a Republican governor. And I think in this day and time, that is just so commendable. She was the first African American and female president of the Tennessee Association of Life Insurance Companies and the first African American and female to chair the Tennessee Life and Health Insurance Guarantee Association. She served on many nonprofit boards, including the Nashville Symphony, YMCA, Girl Scouts of Middle Tennessee, the Nashville chapter of the Lynx Incorporated, and the YW. She graduated from Vanderbilt University, has a BA in economics and a law degree from the Vanderbilt University School of Law. And she and her husband, Cliff, are the proud parents of 2 adult children. She's an avid runner and has completed 5 full marathons. I would ask if you have questions as we go along, maybe just put them in the chat box. And at the end, when she's concluded her remarks, I'll just read those to her. And that way we can, if you want, you can make her screen bigger and we can just focus on her. And with that, I welcome you, Sharon, and turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. First of all, I want to commend this organization because just like the YW in Nashville, Middle Tennessee, you have a very significant place in the history and very significant purpose in this community. The YW has been in the Nashville and Middle Tennessee community for 122 years, so we've been here a long time. And our mission is true today as it has been for a very long time. We seek to eliminate racism, empower women, and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. And that mission has withstood the test of time and has evolved over time. But it's no truer yesterday than it is today. It's very much a part of the fabric and what we do at the YW. One of the major programs of the YW, as many of you will know, is we operate the largest domestic violence center in the state. We give more domestic violence services than anyone. And this is a core to the way that we go about empowering women and keeping women and children, frankly, safe in our community. We were very fortunate to be able to expand to a 65-bed shelter. That's 15 additional beds most recently. And I tell a gentleman that was very fundamental, who was a board member at the time, Joey Hatch, that helped us through that process, that he prepared us for this pandemic. Because but for those extra beds, and this is with 6 families that are presently in hotels, that we're having to do that because of the abundance of need, we would not be able to be anywhere near meeting the needs in the Nashville community. And let me go back to when the pandemic started, because you can go online and find out, because I know we had a limited period of time, find out what is going on as far as the YW and our multitude of programs. But when the pandemic hit after the tornado, we at first wondered if the spike that we saw in domestic violence calls would continue. We had an initial spike. We didn't know if it was a tornado, if it was, a pandemic. We did not know the reasons why. At that time, we did not have an initial request for additional beds. We had some, but it wasn't outside the normal range. The calls tended to level off to 30% year-over-year increase, and now it's about 20% year-over-year increase. What we are seeing now is a huge demand for our bed space. That is the biggest change. And here's what we did find out in analyzing the calls. People were initially very afraid to come into shelter. They chose to stay in really what was an unsafe situation because of the fear of getting a virus and what their lack of knowledge of how we provide services. We did a lot of education because we wanted them to understand the Weaver Center is really like a dorm type setting. The families have wonderful rooms. There's a courtyard with a playground. It's very different than what a lot of people think that shelters are like. It's really called a center because it is really not like you would think a shelter would be. In fact, when people get here, they're amazed at how nice it is. And we do tours, and we're trying to set up so we can do virtual tours that anyone on this call could take the advantage of. So we are really starting to see what other communities that really had the virus to hit their communities before it hit this community. We're seeing the surge that they told us would come. And that I'm actually at the Weaver Center now. I moved my office because our Woodmont office is closed because of the virus. And I've been at Weaver and I'm at Weaver now. And we are seeing the needs grow significantly. Because if you wanted to develop a recipe for domestic violence to spread just as a pandemic, it would be a pandemic. It would be where you have people locked in closed environments. You no longer have the oversight of the schools for the children. You have to remember, children have been at home and they are too not safe at home. You no longer have teachers or social workers or just friends looking to see if everything is okay. And really, I will say this, one of the biggest changes and the biggest issues is you no longer have people to have that resource of their church families. I know that some people look at it, but the church families were really holding down a lot of the oversight to relationships that were not what they should be. I've talked to a number of groups, including church groups, and you know those in your community that need extra support, but they used to have check-in points. Those points are gone. Also, economics, as we know, really fuel a fire in domestic violence when the economics go sideways and they are out of control. So really between the economics, between the lack of being able to have the relief of going to jobs, either the abuser or the abused going to jobs, the schools and the camps being shut down. Now we're seeing at the YW, which is the biggest source for these services, really feeling the real pressure of what has happened during this pandemic with domestic violence. And we're seeing much more critical cases. We already had a system in place where we could determine whether or not a particular case will become lethal or not. It's called a lethality assessment program that we have a wonderful partnership with the Metro Police Force, where we at the YW train all the officers when they go on a domestic violence call. They ask a series of questions, and based on those questions, they can tell the individual that your case can become lethal in the future. And if that is the case, they will advise you, but it's voluntary, that you can talk right there on the spot to one of the YW's crisis counselors. And they can talk to you about several things. Some people want to come into shelter. We're working that out. As I said, we have 6 families as I speak. They're in hotels because we don't have the space anymore here at the Weaver Center. And we keep you fed, clothing, keep you safe. Or they can also work out safety plans. Now the safety plans have gotten very difficult because a lot of times people want to leave, but the most dangerous time to leave a violent relationship is, the most dangerous time is when you decide to leave a very violent relationship. And so that is some of the things that we have had to really work on. At the same time, we've worked very hard to keep the Weaver Center virus free. We've had very strict protocols for staff and also for the residents. If you should have to leave the Weaver Center, you have to go through a protocol of your temperature. I have my gloves on. I'm taking my mask off for the Zoom call because I'm in the room just with myself. Social distancing is different, but we are really, really trying hard to keep everyone, even the children, to understand that they need to be aware, washing hands, keeping their surroundings as clean as possible. We've had extra cleaning. We've cleaned so much on a routine basis. Every room that is vacated, if someone moves out of shelter, goes through it's expensive because we're a nonprofit, a cleaning process, a specialized cleaning process before someone else comes into that room. Anyone coming in, they have to go through the CDC recommended guidelines, and we offer PPP. It's required for our staff to wear at all times. And I will say this, the hardest thing is really with the children. Right now, of the 66 individuals, not counting those that are off-site that are in our care, more than half are children. And I'm going to tell everyone that's talking about opening up a school, daycare, summer camp, or whatever, children do not social distance well. They do not wear masks well. We'll have masks on the little babies and they're 5 years old. And I said, well, what happened to your mask? I don't know. I think it's over there. I mean, one little child threw away his mask. We tried to make him kind of fun for me, threw his mask away. I don't want to wear this. Okay. So they just, I hate it for them anyway, but see, adults, you can kind of wrap your mind around the mask. No, I don't know how they're going to do it because these babies do not want to wear these masks. They can't do it. They can't social distance. I'm just helping them. No, these are your crayons. No, it's just virtually impossible. And I hate that they're in a world that that's even an option that they have to try, but that's something that people need to understand. Children play differently. Their minds are different. They're freer. And that just to wrap your mind around always these constraints has just been virtually impossible. But we've been very blessed that we have not had a case. Now we've kept the testing system going. If other people are not getting tested, the YW has done its share. We've tested individuals. We have a separate area quarantine until their tests come back, that they have to stay in that space. And rather than the community kitchen, those spaces where they're quarantined have their own microwaves and refrigerators, and we take food to the room. So knock on wood, and with the blessings of the universe, we've been able to keep the virus out of the Weaver Center. But it's been a lot of work, heavy lifting, making staff feel more comfortable. But I will say it has been a difficult journey, but we have not turned away people. We have not had no days where the Weaver Center has not been open to provide safety in the community. Other areas of the YW, we have continued all of our programs that become virtual programs. We're in the midst of 2 summer camps, one for our Girls Inc. affiliate programs. They're virtual. I've been amazed. I guess the girls are starving at home for something to do, but the participation of the girls has been amazing. We had 80 families on our virtual orientation. 60 of the girls are participating. It was actually sold out our first week of summer camp for the girls. So tremendous work there. We actually put together the packets for the girls, and we had drop-off locations or mail them, and the people came to get them, and they're doing STEM projects, they're doing art projects. Everything's all in their little, it was like a little string backpacks with all the things loaded in them. So that's worked out wonderful. Our Men Together, our engaging program to help build stronger malehood, that's become virtual. We're signed up out, with everyone in our Family Learning Center. That's virtual, and that's actually the easiest program because evidently online education, online education has been the easiest transition that we've made because they had the systems in place. The infrastructure for teaching classes online was actually one of the easier things to do. We were concerned that our adult learners wouldn't have access to the hardware needed for online education, but that was seamless. They were able to make it work. Dress for Success, we've done virtual suitings. Career counseling has suffered, but that's something that we're really working toward beefing up because so many people are displaced from work, and we want them to have the best opportunity possible to move forward, to really reconfigure themselves, to really work toward getting their education, getting their expertise so they can go into that next cycle of their careers. I will say this, we are seeing now much more of a demand for our social justice and advocacy. On June the 24th from 12 to 1, we will have a virtual Zoom. We have what we called our Stand Against Racism series of lunch and learns. We've had them for some time as part of our advocacy. And this particular one may be of real interest to this group is on voter restoration. And the reason we thought that was important is so many people in our systems are disenfranchised and not able to vote, especially if you look at many of the European nations, other nations, once you've done certain things, you're good to go. You can go ahead and vote again, but we keep a lot of people out of the voting system through various mechanisms. And that's what the discussion will be. It's on voter restoration and also voting rights to make sure that all the gains, from the women getting the right to vote, the Civil Rights Act, people all getting the right to vote, and then for us to go backwards is really, really disheartening because the political process is something that we absolutely have to participate in now more than ever. because that's the way to get your voice heard. That really is the way to get your voice heard, is to vote. And I hate that I hear a lot of people who are younger people interface with in our school programs. They're thinking, why would you need to vote? It's not something you give up on. It's not something you can give up on, because if you don't vote, then you really let the other people who think differently from you just do whatever they want to do. It's those that vote that makes a difference. So I know I kind of threw a lot at you, but I don't know if anyone has any questions about some of the things that the YW is doing in general. Some of the things we're looking at, we're just, doing what we can to make sure that this community is safe and make sure that the mission of the YWCA continues even in these most difficult times. Oh, the panel on voter restoration is June the 24th from 12 to 1. You can go on the YWCA.com, YWCANashville.com website and get information, www.ywcanashville.com, and look under our social justice tab, and you can get all the information about it. But if anyone wants it, I can get it sent out to this group.
Anyone have a question? I guess I have one, and that is, I know that the YW's focus is more on women and the domestic violence shelter is more on women, but that there are both men who are abused and men who are abusers. And I guess I was wondering what resources there are for men, either through the Y or referred to someone.
Yes, actually, we do provide services to men. In fact, one of the families that we have in our hotel, that's for men. The reason we have the strategy of using hotels and have the relationships is primarily because we only have women and children in the Weaver Center. And so when a man is a victim, that is what we do. We typically hotel. Now, we've had to use that more because of space constraints and because of the pandemic, but that's typically what we do. The reason we speak more of women versus men is that just the data, the numbers show us women are much, much, much more likely. And it's really a rarity for a man to be a victim, but they are victims of domestic violence. So we do provide them with services, our counseling services, transitional housing support, and all the things that we provide. We do that for men also.
Okay. I guess Debbie has posted a question of, could you talk a little bit more about the AMEND program?
Okay. The AMEND program is really our homegrown version of, I guess, counterpart to the Girls Inc. Girls Inc., we are an affiliate of a larger organization, and Girls Inc. is designed to help girls understand that they can be strong, smart, and bold. A few years ago, we started looking through a different lens, and I was actually on the board of the YW at the time, of how we can tackle domestic violence on another front. And this was designed to engage men in the conversation around domestic violence, because it's very difficult if women, it's like so many things, if women were the people trying to solve it, it would be done. And so we wanted to engage men in the community, saying, well, there are enough good men in this community that will understand this issue and get educated and understand that they have to hold not only themselves, but other men accountable for the things that happen in our community that end up supporting domestic violence. We always look at an iceberg model where there are a lot of things underneath, a lot of things in that iceberg underneath the surface of violence that really support that. Looking the other way, the language that you use, talking about women other ways, objectification of women, all those things we need to get into those schools. And we're in 23 Metro Nashville public schools. And we talk to young boys in middle and high schools about really the way that they view women, even the issue of, consent, those sorts of things, because if you view women as lesser than, then you treat them that way. And so this is a program. We also do, trainings. We train, the Predators players and staff, the Titans players. We've done training at Bank of America, corporations. We get at Vanderbilt Medical Center. And we talk about, I always say that, you know, because I'm a lawyer by background, I have done a lot of training in the EEOC area. What we do is we add something more. It's something more than just the legal requirements, because legal requirements people address through training. We're talking about the culture that's underneath those legal requirements that make you understand how you have to have a culture that's positive for all people to flourish. That is not, you know, just, you know, this is what happens. This is how you're going to get punished if you don't do the right thing. This is saying why you need to do the right thing, because it is the right thing to do. That's the MEN program. And Shane Foster, a former basketball player at Vanderbilt, is in charge of that program. And it's it's a very good program and very impressive how it's grown. We're actually, because of the work done here in Nashville, going to be moving to 5 additional states. And they're going to be affiliates of our program in these 5 additional states.
Wow. Lenore has asked, how do you keep families and staff safe since the location of the shelter is public?
Well, the location of the shelter is not public at all. It is a private location. However, I will say, because of the, and it's one of the things you have to sign off on if you take a tour of it or you've been a resident, that you will keep it private. Now, with that said, you know, people don't always do what they're supposed to do. However, we do talk to you when you come into shelter. You're instructed on how to turn off on your cell phone, your location locator, because often abusers will follow people using their cell phone technology. You do have to sign that you will keep this location confidential. I will say this is that we are going to have to, if we can get the resources, to do something more given how technology has changed. We do have a very good infrastructure, check-ins. We have a huge fence. We have a very daunting fence. So if you want to get in here, you have to do more than just walk through the door. And so we have a lot of those, I call them the old school methodologies of keeping it very safe and secure. But with that said, we went along when we were looking at possible additional expansions to other states. And when you go to Dallas, you know, we were wondering, well, how can we find your shelter? You know, do we have to have a checkoff point? They said, no, here's the address, because they had such an infrastructure of going through, you know, you just know where the address is. It's very difficult to get into the shelter. And they use really state-of-the-art methods of letting people into the shelter. They call them people catchers. If you go through one door, you show your ID, you have to get to the next door. There are all these different things. They have security guards, they have things like that. And they just basically realize that just fences and, you know, things of that nature don't necessarily carry the day in today's technology world, because, you know, people, you know, they're not supposed to turn on their location locators with their phones when they are in the center. But if someone does that, you can really find the location. But we do our best to keep it secure and not public.
Okay. I think this is from Melanie, and I think it maybe goes back to the Amend program. And she would like to know if you know the other 5 states where the program is expanding.
Okay, it's in California. They're going to be Silicon Valley. They're all YWCA locations. There's Mohawk Valley, their YW location. They're going to be in Virginia. It's going to be Indianapolis. It's going to be in Memphis. Well, Memphis is in Tennessee. That's another location. And Virginia, Dayton, Ohio also, Dayton, Ohio.
Okay. Debbie asks, last year the legislature passed a bill for victims of domestic abuse to keep their address confidential. Has that worked well?
Yes, it has been a game changer. What this legislation did is, because you may have a water bill, a phone bill, things of this nature make it easy for abusers to find your new location. It makes you less secure in moving forward. And what this does, it gives you, I call it a dummy address that you can route your mail to and get your mail. The biggest concern is only for a limited period of time that they will do this. I guess they cannot continue to handle your mail and forward it, you know, forever. But so far it's been very good and very seamless in the way that works, and it's helped a lot of people. So it's a very good legislation. It's just that it has limitations, but most things do.
Okay. I guess I had a question when I was looking at your bio. You know, most of your career has been in the insurance industry. And I guess I was wondering what about the YWCA appealed to you when you decided to pursue this position that you're in now?
Yes, even in my work, I actually, me and another attorney, when I was general counsel of American General Life and Accident, we spearheaded a program for women at American General that was part of AIG that was adopted by AIG Corporation as a whole. The reason for that is I've always felt as though I had an obligation to help other women, to help them up. You know, being a senior executive in a corporation can be lonely unless you use that as your platform to bring other women forward. So I was really drawn to really the empowering women, but also eliminating racism part of the mission. I was asked to join the board. And at that time, I was so busy and involved in Girl Scouting, which I was a Girl Scout and being part of that board. But I thought this really resonated with me, the mission statement. I said, let me look at this because I always wanted to give back. I've served on a number of boards, some of them professional boards. I've been appointed to boards all over the country from the insurance perspective. And part of it is that I want to bring that extra value of making people really see things through the lens of those who don't have as much. I was very fortunate to have educated parents and good environments as far as my family life, but I did, even with that, have a lot of challenges when it came to my race and my sex, really. And even hearing the programs and the injustices that happen, I know that people here will probably find this very strange. One day, my mother is 90, my father is 90. I've been blessed to have both of my parents still living at their ages. And one day I was talking to my mother, this was years ago, about different things that she has seen over time. And she says, one thing that always stood out is that people talk in theoretical terms about poll taxes and things of that nature. And she remembers when she had her first teaching job. This was before I was even born. And it was in a little town in Arkansas, Augusta, Arkansas. And she was there and she wanted to vote because my mother's a big advocate. You need to vote, you need to vote. And she went down to the station and everyone was lined up to get ready to vote. And they told her she had to pay, I think it was a nominal amount, and there was those terms, it was a lot. And especially for people of color, it would have been insurmountable. I think it was a nickel or something like that to vote. And she didn't notice the people in front of her paying this to vote. Now my mother, if you knew her, she was gonna vote. So she came into her, now she was a teacher, which puts her in that elite category of income, even though it was something next to nothing. It was more than most people had, because they were farmers, they were poor people. And she paid her money to vote. And she said it always bothered her why she had to pay that money to vote. But I said, well, Mom, you know that was a poll tax or something like that. But she had to pay money because they said she was not born in Augusta, Arkansas. And that's why the people in front of her didn't have to pay, but she did, with no kind of law anywhere. I mean, it was just craziness. But she said those are kind of things that she had to live with in her generation. So if you see people who have gone through that, for you not to vote is a sin, for you not to vote. You cannot have someone to have to deal with that. And then you say, well, I'm just too tired today, I'm not gonna vote. That's just not acceptable.
Okay. Madeline is asking, what is the average stay for the women and families at the shelter?
We have had to evolve to being an emergency shelter. There used to be 90-day stays, and frankly, I haven't worked here, you know, every day since, you know, early in March. You know, I was always over it, but actually physically being here every day, 90 days is a good stay. That's a good period of time to at least give you some time to get yourself together. But we have to move to emergency stays of 45 days. We relaxed those dates somewhat because of COVID, because frankly, people did not have a place to transition to it. We just could not do it. And for a while, we were able to do that. We're having to move back now to that 45-day emergency stay. With that said, if someone needs a little extra days because they're moving someplace else or they've gotten their child's care situation worked out, because a lot of people who have relatives in other states cannot go to live with those other relatives even now that they feel like they can travel more. because they have custody issues. And the judges will not let you move and take the children out of state, because unless you can document the children have been abused, and they mean by this physical abuse, most of these judges will not let you take these children to a state, even when their fathers, even if there's a documented domestic violence. That's something, you know, people need to understand. It's very, very difficult. It's very difficult, but that's just the reality of a situation. So they're still here in Tennessee, despite having people that can support and help them in other states. It's just the way the system works. And they don't consider the mental abuse of children seeing abusive situations, which is huge and documented. And you know that children that witness domestic violence will either be abused, or more likely be abused, or abusers. But they just, that doesn't carry the weight in the court of law, unfortunately.
Okay, here's one from Amy. I've been a volunteer at the Weaver Community Market. If
Yes.
you are moving people out in 45 days, you must need household goods for them to move with. When can we start to help with that again?
Okay, we just had that conversation, believe it or not, earlier. For a while, you know, when we first were dealing with the pandemic, it was like we were on lockdown. In fact, women have asked us, when is the community market opening up? We are looking at our strategy now and the documentation and what we will need for volunteers to come back, because we can't really do that without our volunteers. We're very fortunate. Our volunteers are chomping. They want to come back in. So we're looking at in the next few weeks, opening it back up to volunteers being able to give their service. We've had some one-off volunteers because, you know, keeping all of those people, all of those who we care for, fed and clothed, especially when the kids are out of school, and kids eat a lot of food. I was thinking, what are we serving? I mean, we've had a tremendous uptick in the amount of food we have to provide. So in order to get that all straightened out, we've allowed some volunteers to help in the area. But we absolutely are looking at bringing the community market and the volunteers back, because we're just really feeling the pressure now of not having those extra hands on deck.
Okay. Thank you. Carol asks, why do so many women who have been abused fail to show up when a case is going to court?
Well, I think that people need to understand it. And when you talk to people who are victims of domestic violence, they will tell you something that really seems strange to some people, that the physical violence is the easiest thing to get over. The physical violence is the easiest. It's the psychological aspects of domestic violence that often people really don't think about. That's the most difficult thing. You feel controlled by this person. You feel fear of this person. You feel lesser than. And so what you're talking about is you going into a system of facing someone that has told you that you're not going to make this. They're not going to go along with you. Why would they believe you over me? Look at all I have going for you. There are a lot of psychological sit-ups, as I call them, that you've gone through. Plus, I will tell you very honestly, a lot of the women really care for these men. This may be the father of your children, someone that not on the first time you met them or the first date mistreated you. So there is that level of affection. So you want the violence to stop, but going through the process and fear of prosecuting that person and sending them to jail, the father of children, there's just that protection. So what I'm trying to describe is a number of reasons and factors why the person may not show up. Sure, they call the police because you want to save your life and you want this to stop. But that doesn't mean you necessarily want that person punished in that way. And that seems sort of strange to some people, but it is what it is. And that translates to you not showing up. Because the court system is tough. Sitting there facing that person that you have a real fear of is really a tough thing. I've seen women shivering and shaking. They're just so scared and afraid of that confrontation.
Okay. Anyone else? I guess I was going to follow up on when you were talking about the volunteers and the store that you have. I was wondering what kinds of volunteer opportunities that the YW has generally.
Okay, well, if you want to do it, we need you, because the multitude of our programs, we really need people who really are dedicated to helping us. You can do anywhere from tutoring services. We need that all day. If you have a ability to do any sort of math, because often our adult learners, that's the biggest hurdle they have, is getting through math. You can go one-on-one and help our young girls in Girls Inc., meeting with them at their schools for lunch once a month to talk to them and encourage them. You can be an Amend ambassador or work with the Amend program to help the young boys. There are a multitude of things you can do here at the Weaver Center. You can help, some people want to go out and help in the courtyard to keep it spruced up. Some people want to work with the children. So when we have the sessions with the women, these are people that sit there and work with the children. We definitely are going to have that opened up to our volunteers, because right now it's a difficulty with us, with the children, working with them to be able to move the mothers forward. We have a Renew program, which is a fabulous program. We actually changed what is a house to a home. We have volunteers that actually go in there and help to work on the home. So when women move into their own apartments, they have the things that they need. We have a warehouse full of donated furniture to help them and help them move to that next phase of their lives. What I would say is the best thing for anyone that wants to volunteer, if they can get to our website, and Allison Adams, who is in charge of all of our volunteers, is absolutely phenomenal. You name what you're most interested in. We work backwards. We ask you, what are you most interested in doing to help move this mission forward? And then we work you into that. Some people, their gift is they like planning events, and we have event fundraisers. Some people like to cook. We can work with you on that. Some people like to do all sorts. Depends on what you really are most interested in doing. Some people are very interested in our advocacy, and they serve on our advocacy committee. If you want to work with us in advocating on behalf of victims of domestic violence, or you're interested in eliminating racism, having some of these difficult conversations in our community on a very neutral, very open space. Let's talk about these things as opposed to just fighting between ourselves. For instance, in July, we're already planning to have a forum, and it's going to be something that I think is the YW should do, where we have such a strong relationship with Captain Anderson and his staff. Police Chief Anderson and Captain Richter, who is head of the domestic violence unit. And I reached out to those two, because I don't think that people in Nashville know all the progressive measures that our police force has gone through. I don't think that people really understand that. And that's a strange position. I think people think that a Black woman to take, but I've been up close and personal and worked with them as our Amend ambassadors, seeing them work with our kids, understanding all the things that they have put in place. Visited with Chief Anderson at the Civil Rights Room at the public library downtown. I think that if people really looked at the things the police force have put in place, that maybe we can come together to a better spot of having mutual understanding and respect. We do have bad people in all sorts of ways of life, but we cannot continue to have a us or them mentality and move forward. We're gonna have to do something better than that. And I have a lot, because my knowledge base is broader, and I want to bring that knowledge base to the broader community.
Melanie makes a comment that is just so heartening to hear, and I think we all agree. Any other questions? Barbara Footer, you're awesome. We really appreciate it. We thank you for joining us today. It's a little bit new for us to be in the Zoom format, and we appreciate you working with us, and I've learned a lot about the YW here today, and maybe contacting someone about some of the volunteering. I think that sounds really interesting.
Thank you.
With that, thank you so much. And we appreciate knowing about your work. We hope everyone here will join us again on July 10th to hear Jeff Roberts of the Davidson County Election Commission. Thank you.
All right, well, you all take care and stay safe.
We give some applause.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.